To start off this video, we're going to look backwards and forwards in time. So first of all, let's go back, all the way back to E3 2019, more specifically June 11th, 2019. Luckily, we've been given a couple of directs since then, though a lot of people don't think they lived up to just how amazing E3 2019 really was for Nintendo. The direct started by showing the viewer a segment of Link fighting in a Smash Bros.-like arena. Go forward through the direct, and both Link's Awakening and Cadence of Hyrule were shown off in the middle of the presentation. And the real kicker, and the one we're going to be talking about in a bit more detail today, Breath of the Wild sequel was also officially announced. We had hopes that a sequel was on the way, so that alone was already enough to have us on the edge of our seats, shouting at our screens. But on top of just the reveal of the game, we were given one of the most bone-chilling game teasers I've ever seen, especially for a Zelda game. Link and Zelda walking around some caves for what we can only assume is Ganondorf's deceased corpse, as the couple eventually find him later on. This shows us that this isn't just any Zelda game. This portrays emotions that you can only describe as fear, especially during some parts of the trailer. I mean, the trailer itself straight out plays like a horror movie for Pete's sake. This shows us the awaited return of the dark Zelda theming, the likes of which we haven't seen since the release of Twilight Princess, and considering Twilight Princess is my favourite game in the series, it made me all the more excited. I mean, everything in this trailer gave me Twilight Princess vibes, the atmosphere, lighting, theme in general, and for me the best Zelda game would come in the form of a mix between both Breath of the Wild and Twilight Princess. Now of course, back in 2019 there was only so much we could be excited for, since it was a minute and a half trailer at most, but we were still sitting there, waiting for the time to come, the time where we could see something new on the game, and we waited, and we waited, and we waited, and we're still waiting. But in a month, I don't think we'll be waiting anymore. So next, let's skip forward in time since I love circling around a point, so let's go ahead a month. We don't exactly know when Nintendo's E3 presentation will be yet, but it has to be between the 12th and the 15th. I'm placing my bets on it being the final presentation on the 15th. I don't have any evidence for that at all, it's really just a guess to be honest with you. First of all, I predict it will be the biggest direct at least since E3 2019. That doesn't seem like such a hard thing to do overall. I mean, there's a lot of projects that we hope Nintendo is working on. Along with Zelda, people are still looking forward to your Marios, your Metroids, Pokemons, Donkey Kongs, and so on. And while I'm not doing the video on my expectations for Nintendo's E3 until just before E3, today I would like to talk about why I think Breath of the Wild sequel will be at E3 2021, in at least some capacity, in a month's time. Now I know I've already answered the question in the title, but please do go ahead and stay for a while to hear exactly why I think it's coming this E3. I did a similar video like this back in December for the Game Awards, in which I broke down a ton of things that meant no matter what, that Breath of the Wild was going to be at the Game Awards either at the very end or the very beginning. And of course I was incorrect there. But with that being the case and February rolling around with no news on the game, I am absolutely certain with utmost certainty that we'll be seeing it next month. So let's get into it. First of all, and most obviously, it has already been 2 whole years since the game was announced for the Switch. By that point, it had already been 2 years and a bit since the original game came out. Of course, a lot of factors played into this, as Breath of the Wild did have some added DLCs as well, in the form of Champion's Ballad and the Trials of the Master Sword. So we could say that they didn't really even finish development of the game until the end of 2017, or maybe even the start of 2018. That still leaves 3 years of development time for a game that could well reuse a ton of assets, and that we already know isn't changing the art style. That's a really long time for such a game. I've talked about it before and I'll talk about it again. Majora's Mask came out 2 years after Ocarina of Time with the reusing of assets and people still love the game. Breath of the Wild 2, providing they have been working on that for the last 3 or 4 years, could well be one of the greatest Zelda experience to date. But that aside, most fully fledged new Zelda games take around 5 or 6 years until they come out after their previous game. For example, Skyward Sword to Breath of the Wild was 6 years, which means we'd already be around half of the way to a new Zelda game, never mind a game that is most likely going to reuse a lot of its previous game's assets. This tells me that this game could theoretically come out at the end of the year or around spring of next year. Of course, this could be later, but we're going off of hypotheticals here today. This would mean that we have 6 months to a year until the game releases. There is absolutely no better time for the Zelda team to get us hyped up with the trailer of the newest and possibly one of the biggest Zelda games. With that information, it already seems pretty dead set that we'll get Breath of the Wild's trailer if we're being serious with ourselves. I can see it being one of those things that close or open the presentation up or out respectively. Next is something Aonuma said a good while ago now, and even said in the latest direct back in February. Let's go back in time to back when Aonuma and Koei Tecmo Games announced Age of Calamity. To this day I uphold that it was one of the coolest reveals for a game ever. It was just one of those things that seemed like it was obvious in retrospect, but just at the time you aren't thinking about it. Something that's on the tip of your tongue, but they just give it a name. And like that, Aonuma gave us a glimmer of hope. News for Breath of the Wild would take a little longer. Even back then, everyone took that quote with a very big grain of salt. But if we knew anything for sure, we knew that Aonuma knew that news on the game wouldn't take forever now. Wow, that's a tongue twister. We at least knew that the game was carrying on as it should be, and we'd be getting news for it at least in the next year, probably a little less. And even during the last Direct, he confirmed as much at the same time as revealing Skyward Sword. The words that he said were that Breath of the Wild 2 news will be coming around about some point later in the year. And it'll have been 4 months when E3 rolls around since the last Direct. That's definitely later in the year. And this is about the exact second where I knew that if E3 was on and if Nintendo were there, I was and am almost certain that we'll be seeing Breath of the Wild 2 news there. Even only a title reveal and a release window would satisfy me at this point, but I'll talk about exactly what I can see them showing for Breath of the Wild 2 in a couple weeks time. The final thing that I think plays a part in why I expect the game to get a proper trailer soon is because of the fans. I know we all say that Nintendo doesn't look or listen to the fans. I agree in most cases, but in this case I really cannot see it. They simply wouldn't have told us that Breath of the Wild sequel was getting news this year if they didn't know how much of a backlash the Direct would have received had it not mentioned Breath of the Wild sequel at all. And of course, some people take it too far when talking about something and start hurling insults at a company when they're waiting for one of their games. And while saying that Breath of the Wild 2 is on the horizon makes fans even less patient, it can only really be a good thing in this case. Of course, as I said, most people do take it to some extremes and start going against the company and saying they should just release the game now. But the longer the game takes, the more of a guarantee we have that it'll end up being actually really good. And that really is all we could want as fans at the end of the day. If they made the mainline Zelda games a yearly series or something like Assassin's Creed, it simply wouldn't be good enough or special enough to us anymore. The longer that a new game takes, the larger that the hype flies. The better that we hope everything comes out. So really what I'm trying to say here is that if they don't show the game at E3 this year, and we have to wait until September, then certain people will definitely riot against Nintendo. But to give a conclusion, yes, I really do think that we'll see Breath of the Wild 2 in a month for E3 2021, and I'll talk about exactly what we will see in a couple of weeks time. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you did enjoy, then please subscribe and like the video. I'm trying to make a small push for 1,500 subscribers before the end of the month, so thank you in advance if you do. Thank you so much to these people up on screen, and of course Sumji's been sat at the top of that pile for ages now. If you'd like to join them, then please do consider looking at the link to my Patreon in the description and pledging some money if you can and of course want to. As I said, the link's in the description along with my other social medias. My Twitch is down there and I'll be streaming E3 and Weight of Breath of the Wild in a month's time. So go and follow me there. Enough of all that. Thank you so much for watching, stay safe, and I'll see you next Sunday. Please do stay safe.